Welcome, everyone, to the Cover 2 podcast. I'm your co-host, Jared Smith.
And I'm your co-host, Nenad.
Guys, we've got a great show for you guys today. Week 2 of the NFL, Week 3 of college football, another football-filled podcast. Obviously, as you can see, I'm repping all my Cowboys gear. Nick's got his Cardinals gear on. Both of our teams won this week. We're excited and we're happy. On the college football front, one of our teams won in USC. Another one of our teams did not. But he did call that. We are going to get into that a little bit later on in the show. We will get into college football week 3, the updated rankings, and what our thoughts and takeaways were from this week in college football. But we have to get started with the NFL. Nick, once again, back-to-back weeks. We've had some amazing primetime football games, right? Obviously, we had Monday Night Football last week. The opener with the Cowboys and the Bucs was amazing. And then on Sunday Night Football, Chiefs and Ravens, unreal, man. 36-35. Lamar Jackson puts the team on his back and literally flips into the end zone to not only take the lead, but get the Ravens their first win after a heartbreaking loss on Monday Night Football last week to the Raiders. So let's just jump right into that, man. We got to start right there. Chiefs, Ravens get that big win. What were your initial takeaways of that game, and where do you see these two teams going from here?
Yeah, I mean, what a game, right? Like you said, all of the primetime games have been good, every single one. Now, if you're wondering why we're not starting off with Monday Night Football this week like we did last week, it's because we're recording 45 minutes before the game starts. So we will not be talking about that game on our podcast. And to be honest, we both predict Packers with an easy win, so not really much to say there. If something drastic happens or the Lions win, we will you will see something in this podcast. You will see something. And,
Packers by double digits.
Yeah, this opening won't make much sense, but still, the magic of editing, right, Jared Smith? But yeah, we're going to start with that Sunday night game, and I think that probably was the game of the week. My takeaways, Jared, are it's really two takeaways. One, the Chiefs are still the best or second best team in the NFL, and they are virtually unstoppable with the ball. And number two, when Lamar Jackson wants to win a football game, he seems to be able to. Because, again, the Chiefs are the number 1 or 2 team in the NFL, and Lamar Jackson won that game. He's missing plenty of running backs. He's missing Rashad Bateman at wide receiver. Mark Andrews hasn't been the same this year. And they still end up putting 36 up against the Chiefs and win a ball game at home. So I just think this game was about Lamar Jackson proving that this team is a playoff team. That it does not matter who gets hurt. As long as he is on the field, the Ravens have a chance at a playoff run, to be honest. Because when you look at how you defend against the Chiefs, it's by keeping the ball on offense. And that's exactly what the Ravens do. So my takeaway, Lamar is a beast, and the Chiefs are still the Chiefs, and they won't lose too many games this year. But, you put a strategy like the Ravens did last night, and you put a quarterback on your back like that, or a team on your back like Lamar Jackson did, you end up winning football games. Very, very impressive, Jared.
Well, it's funny because, like you say, keep Patrick Mahomes off the field, right? Like that's how the best way to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. But Lamar Jackson scored that go-ahead touchdown with 3 minutes left. So the Chiefs had plenty of time. I'm not sure how many timeouts they had, but they had 3 minutes and change to go down the field and score, and all they needed was a field goal, right? It just so happened that Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a case of the fumbles and coughed the ball up, and Baltimore got it back, and they were able to run out the clock. So realistically, you're leaving. I mean, we saw it in the opening game, right? When my Dallas Cowboys went and played against Tampa Bay, Dallas scored with 1:24 left. Guess what? That's still way too much time for Tom Brady. So 3 minutes is a lifetime for Patrick Mahomes and that offense to go down and score. If they wouldn't have fumbled, I mean, I'd bet the house that they could have gotten at least in field goal range and given their kicker an opportunity to win. So, but that's obviously not what happened. I think we've got to give credit where credit is due. And you're right, Lamar Jackson coming back from throwing those 2 interceptions, one that wasn't really his fault to begin the game. I believe it was Sammy Watkins that slipped on a slant route, and Tyrann Mathieu literally was just right behind and said, "Oh, thank you." It was a gift, an early Christmas gift, and he was able to take it back to the house. The second interception Lamar Jackson threw was more of his fault, and he does need to clean up those turnovers, especially like you mentioned, the fact that they're literally on their 4th and 5th running backs depth-wise, and they're not at full strength at receiver. So Lamar Jackson showed that he can be Superman and lead this team. I'm just not so sure that, it's going to need to take that heroics every single week, right? You're going to want to make it a little bit easier on yourself by not having those turnovers, relying on your defense a little bit more. That Ravens defense is not going to give up 35 points a game. It just so happens they were going up against the Chiefs. So my takeaway is, yes, the Chiefs are going to be fine. Like, do not even start to hit the panic button. They will be fine. They will rebound next week against whoever they're playing. And for the Ravens, I think this was a huge win because you have that Monday night loss, right? That heartbreaking loss at Las Vegas, and then you come home. If they were to go down 0-2 in this division, when you've got Cleveland and you've got Pittsburgh, even though Pittsburgh lost today, that's still a tough division. So I think this was, I don't want to say a must win, but a huge win for Baltimore to get on that win column and get a little momentum going into week 3.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this, though. I still think, like I said, the Chiefs are a 1-2 NFL team. There is a tiny bit of concern, I believe, in their defense because when you look at the interceptions by Lamar, they were pretty bad plays. Like most NFL teams would have intercepted those balls, realistically. All the credit due to Tyrann Mathieu on the first one, but still bad reads, bad throws by Lamar Jackson. And if he doesn't do those, Ravens win relatively easy, right? If you look at it that way, I know the Chiefs would have turned it on and probably tried a little harder, but I think the Ravens win this game regardless if, Lamar doesn't have those interceptions. So I think the Chiefs now, you have 2 rushing attack teams, and they're averaging 32 points a game on defense. That's not very good, and I know that those teams, you don't play them every week. And yes, the Chiefs will be, 1 or 2 seed in the AFC, but come playoff time, if they run into these teams that run the hell out of the ball, it's not going to be easy if this defense plays like it has the last 2 weeks. So Patrick Mahomes gives you a chance to win every single game, but the defense cannot just keep letting 30 points every single game, especially to these playoff teams that run the ball. It's not going to work. It's not going to work later on in the season. So they have obviously 16 or 15 more games to figure it out, and they probably will. But it's a little bit concerning if you're a Chiefs fan. A little bit concerning.
It's concerning, and like when you look on paper, it's not like this Chiefs defense, at least defense, right? They've got is it Dayton Jones? I forget his first name, but I know his last name is Jones. He just signed like a mega extension for a defensive tackle, right? They have Jerron Reed, who they traded for from the Seattle Seahawks, who's more of a run stuffing guy, and then you got Frank Clark on the edge. So they have some big names on their defensive line. But for whatever reason, at least in like the first halves of games, the first half against Cleveland in week 1, and then the first half and basically most of this game against the Ravens, they have huge lanes that they cannot clog up. It's like their linebackers are more speed sideline to sideline guys. They're not these big Brian Urlacher, Ray Lewis type guys that are going to run stuff. But I'm a little surprised because it's not like they have scrubs. Right? If they had no name players on their defensive line, I'd be like, okay, it makes a little more sense. But like they're paying a boatload for their defensive line right now, and at least from a rush defense standpoint, they're not getting the job done. So to me, I think they need to take a little more ownership and say, all right, we need that. Like it's on us too. Like as good as the offense is, we can't just rely on them to score 35 points a game. I mean, you can, right? Like it's almost like human nature. Like, all right, we can kind of gamble a little bit. We can give up some points because we know Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and all those guys are going to have our back, which 9 times out of 10, they're going to be able to, make that defense look a lot better. But still, at some point, the defense is going to have to come to play and say, hey, man, like we want to hold up our end of the bargain too. And we haven't really seen that in the first 2 weeks. And I know it's still early, but you're right. I'm a little concerned with the Chiefs defense. I mean, shoot, if I'm Patrick Mahomes, I'm going into that defensive meeting room and saying, hey, guys, like, I know we're great over here and, like, we're good, but can y'all, like, maybe not give up 30 points a game, maybe not give up over, 150, close to 200 rushing yards per game? Because right now, I don't have the stats up, but I can guarantee that the Chiefs are in the bottom 5 as far as rush defense goes from how they looked last week and then giving up, 251 rushing yards to the Baltimore Ravens last night. Not good.
It's not good. No, and you know, one of the things that maybe you could point to is Chris Jones is playing Chris Jones is playing a different position this year. They mentioned on the broadcast. I did not know this because I was unable to watch that entire Cleveland Chiefs game last week. Chris Jones is normally an edge rusher. He's playing defensive end this year. Lamar Jackson, it was like playing a high school defensive end. Like those reads were so easy because Chris Jones doesn't know how to do it yet. So that's another thing. Like there's a lot of questions going in. Why you put the guy you just gave the bag to in the wrong position, right? Against a team that has a running quarterback, like that's, you know,
doesn't make sense.
It's stuff you got to fix, right? And if Chris Jones can't figure it out, it doesn't matter how much you're paid or how good you were at one position. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be great in another position, unless your name is Isaiah Simmons and you can play every single position on the field. The Cardinals number one defender last week. Okay, literally actually the number one defender in that game.
That
had no defense.
About that more. That honestly might be one of the stupidest things I've ever heard, coming from a sports team, you know, paying an athlete that has played so well at one position, making him one of Aaron Donald, was obviously the highest paid defensive tackle, highest paid defensive player in all of football. Actually, T.J. Watt might have just surpassed him because T.J. Watt just got the bag too. But anyways, Chris Jones is making a boatload of money being a defensive tackle. Like that is what he has done. And then to say, oh, hey, you know, we want to move you to a new position that you've never played before, like full time, might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, it's one thing if it's like, okay, you know, depending on the matchup and the team that we're playing, we think that we can put you out on the edge in certain situations or certain defensive packages. But just to say, hey, we're going to literally change your position. Chris Jones did not get the bag by playing defensive end. He did that by playing defensive tackle, right? So, you know, that's the dumbest thing. Whoever made that decision, if that was Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, if that was Andy Reid, whoever the hell that was, you're an idiot, and that needs to be changed right now.
I love it.
Put it back to defensive tackle.
I love it. It's perfect. It's why I brought it up, Jared. It was something that I noticed. And again, like you look at these teams now. I know the Browns are primarily more of like ISO run, like strong I formation, that kind of stuff. But like Baker can run, right? Lamar can run. If you end up playing these other teams that have the running quarterbacks, Josh Allen, right, with the Bills, these are the playoff teams they're going to face. And a lot of them run those schemes where if you have a guy that doesn't know what he's doing, it's the easiest thing ever, right? So, you know, and yet the linebacking core isn't the best. It's not as good as it has been. And even the DBs aren't as good as they have been the last few years too. So, you know, a little bit concerned, but we should move on, Jared, because we do have a lot more games to talk about, but we definitely want to talk about two of the best teams in the NFL in the Ravens and Chiefs. Let's move on to probably the most entertaining game with the worst ending, and that was my Arizona Cardinals playing the Minnesota Vikings. An absolute shootout. It was like they were in the Old West there in Glendale, Arizona. Final score was 34-33. The big thing about this game, Jared, that will really have no ramifications the rest of the season, much like the Cowboys, it will affect a little bit more, but it's the kicking from the Vikings, and really the kicking for the Cardinals too, because you have Matt Prater at the end of the half making a 62-yard field goal with ease, and the kicker from Minnesota, who I did not study to understand his name because he was so trashed yesterday, missed an extra point and missed the game-winning field goal. They lost by 1. I mean, it doesn't get much worse than that. I thought Greg Zuerlein week 1 Thursday Night Football was pretty bad. And then we have Vikings quarterback that is similar to Blair Walsh, missing easy kicks to
Greg
lose.
Joseph.
Yeah, Greg. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so there you go. That piece of trash. That's what I'm going to call him for the rest of the season. Wow. You know, that was for the Vikings. You figure that out, and I don't really think the Vikings are necessarily a playoff team this year, so there's not much to read into them. I want to talk a little bit about my Cardinals, Jared, and I'm going to be critical because there's two things for this game that I saw. One, when the Cardinals have good play calling, they can score at will, really score at will. It's only going to be Cliff Kingsbury that's the reason that they lose certain games. And number two, our defense got exposed in this game. Okay, Dalvin Cook, I've never seen larger holes in my life for a running back. On about a dozen occasions, Kirk Cousins was able to do essentially what he wanted. And I don't know, are the Vikings like a great offensive team? No, I think they're a good offensive team, but those were my two takeaways from this game is that play calling really on offense, if you do it well, the Cardinals are going to be able to score, but man, our defense did not look good in this game. What did you see from this game being an unbiased fan?
You kind of took the words out of my mouth, and I'm just going to put both teams in this category. Both defense looked like trash.
Yeah.
Like it was not, it's fun, like from a fan's perspective, especially someone that doesn't root for either of those teams, to sit back and say, "Oh, I love it," and I had fantasy players on both teams going, so that was fun, right? Everyone's scoring touchdowns, but literally, like, can anyone stop anybody, right? Can someone consistently stop the other team from doing something and make them change their game plan? And I don't think you could say any of that from the Vikings perspective or the Cardinals perspective, right? Like, you're right. Like, Dalvin Cook ran 22 times for 131 yards. Even he was effective enough that Arizona had to put more guys in the box. And they already are depleted and have one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. We talked about this on this podcast just a couple weeks ago when we were doing our NFL preview about the Cardinals. If they're going to struggle anywhere on the defensive side of the ball, it was going to be in that secondary.
Yeah.
And you're right. They made Kirk Cousins look like the at one point almost highest paying quarterback in the NFL. Kirk Cousins, 244 yards, nothing to write home about, but 3 touchdowns. No one is huge from his perspective, right? Minnesota really had an opportunity to win this game, and they should have. So, and then if you're looking from Arizona's side, you're right. Kyler Murray, I mean, the dude is he's so quick and yet so small that if you're a defender, like, you have to get down to his level. So first of all, you have to match his quickness, which no one can do.
No,
I would argue that he's probably, I would put him as maybe the quickest quarterback running.
He is. I think you have to only compare him to Lamar Jackson realistically. And Lamar Jackson actually realistically is more of a power runner than quick.
Yeah, because he'll take hits.
Yeah. Jackson's just fast. Kyler's fast, but he's more quick. Like You never know. You never know. All right, that's going to be it for this podcast. We're going to go watch Monday Night Football. We will see you guys next week. Of course, talking more football, plenty of NFL to talk about next week. And if we have some crazy college news to talk about, we will talk about that as well. But for this podcast, we are done. I am Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And we'll see you guys next week.